Hello. If you're a regular viewer of these videos or have seen any of my stuff on Twitch or anything I've written, you'll know that I'm not big into things like New Year resolutions, because I think if you're going to make a change, then you're not going to wait for a particular day to actually make it. If you really know you need to make it, you're just going to do it regardless of the date. But I do accept the huge potential for significant dates and anniversaries to prompt a certain amount of reflection. And I recently celebrated, it's not the right word for this at all, but yesterday marked the 2-year anniversary of me getting COVID. And since then, I have unfortunately suffered from long COVID, mainly in the form of fatigue with a certain amount of breathlessness. I'm an awful lot luckier than some people who've had repeated COVID infections. As far as I know, I've only had the one. Although I did actually have a very strange, very severe cough in around Christmas 2019. So, but I don't think that was COVID. I think that was just a very bad cough, but it certainly knocked me for six, exactly the way that my COVID infection 2 years ago knocked me for six. And sadly, like an awful lot of people, I can say that my life is divided into pre and post COVID. I mean, obviously all of us can divide our lives into pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, and probably most of us will notice some difference in our lives now. There may be some things that never got back to the way they were before the pandemic struck, but there are a significant number of people who can divide their lives into pre and post actually contracting COVID, because there are a large number of long COVID sufferers out there. And really this video is for them and for anyone who suffers from any form of chronic fatigue, because post-viral fatigue has been a well-recognised thing for some time. It's the post-viral fatigue is actually the origin of ME, that used to be called yuppie flu. Chronic fatigue is also common with other things that aren't so specifically virus linked, like fibromyalgia. But chronic fatigue, whatever the cause, whether it's viral, whether it's due to depression, whether it's due to some other health problem like chronic pain, because trust me, chronic pain is extremely tiring, and I absolutely know that the increasing pain in my hip has fed in to the fatigue I've had due to long COVID. Chronic fatigue is a very, very real problem, and something that an awful lot of people are trying to deal with, and it's very poorly understood. And there is a temptation to say to the person with chronic fatigue that you just need more sleep, you need a better diet, and I did once see a post on Threads where someone said, "Oh, if you're always tired, it's because you drink nothing but coffee in the morning and wine in the evening and don't sleep." And I have to admit, she suffered a bit of a pile-on from people, including me, although I was not abusive, to say, look, no, I know what the cause of my chronic fatigue is. Chronic fatigue, like any chronic condition, and here I'm talking about diabetes, depression, arthritis, heart problems, any chronic health condition is something that can limit what you can do, can have a severe impact on your life in terms of activities you can do, in terms of medications that you need to take, in terms of side effects of medications that you just have to deal with. And it's extremely frustrating because if you take the one common thing, which is chronic pain, you're probably taking painkillers, and you may have migrated to quite strong painkillers like pregabalin or the opioid drugs or even actual opiates, which come with side effects, as anyone who's taken codeine knows, which is a opioid drug. It's quite good at killing pain, but it's also very good at causing constipation. So you have to do something to deal with the constipation. And sometimes any chronic illness can feel like it's become your whole life, that your whole life is spent managing this chronic illness. Now, in some cases, that chronic illness can be due to lifestyle choices that you've made. The most obvious of that is type 2 diabetes, which we know is related to diet and obesity and lack of exercise. But sometimes the chronic illness is nothing you could do anything about. I didn't ask to get COVID. I certainly didn't ask to get long COVID. I certainly didn't ask to have this horrible fatigue that does limit how much I can physically do. It limits how much I can physically sit upright in a chair, unless I've got a nice back to it like this one. So if you have a chronic illness, it is useful to do some reflecting as to how much your choices have contributed to you ending up with that chronic problem. I have arthritis, I've got hip arthritis, I'm on the waiting list for a hip replacement, which I hope will happen in the next couple of months. God bless the NHS. But, I am overweight, and I know that possibly I would not have suffered quite as badly if I had not carried the extra weight for so long. It's not quite as simple as that, and I know it's not quite as simple as that. But sometimes, with a chronic illness, all you can do is just say, right, this is where I am. How am I going to learn to live with it? Because it is so easy to let the illness dominate your life and to think about all the things that you can't do, rather than looking for, okay, I can't do that, but what else can I do? Personally speaking, I've had to limit the amount of standing up work that I do. I used to deliver 2 or 3 sessions of standing Tai Chi Qigong a week and 2 seated sessions. I've had to limit it to 1 standing session, which I do online, and 1 seated session, because any more than that and I can't do it. But I can do more stuff that I can do seated, like these videos, because I can do them without driving anywhere, and I can do them in the comfort of my armchair at a time that suits me and still get my message out there. I no longer really offer one-to-one face-to-face appointments, but I'm very happy to do one-to-one video appointments. If you've watched many of these videos, you will know that at the end I'm going to say, look, if you want to talk more about this, contact me and I'm happy to arrange a one-to-one video appointment at a time that suits us both for a donation of whatever you can afford. Accessible wellbeing for all means I've got to try and offer services to people who haven't got vast amounts of money to pay out. And that's the thing. We know there is a direct link between poverty and ill health. And that means that an awful lot of the people who are struggling with things like asthma, diabetes, arthritis, are suffering from them due to constraints, due to lack of money, constraints due to poor social and living conditions. If they had a little more money, they could maybe move to somewhere better that was less damp, that didn't exacerbate their arthritis and didn't make them more vulnerable to illnesses, and where they actually had cooking facilities so they could actually start to think about having cooking food from scratch. And why do I mention that? Because we know that your diet impacts directly on health, but your income directly affects the kind of diet that you can eat. It's all a horrible kind of vicious circle, and it's a vicious circle that anyone who's got a chronic illness will probably relate to. Sometimes you just have to accept where you are. It might not be where you want to be. You have to accept where you are, and you have to take small steps that you can to move yourself from where you are to where you want to be. Now, because I got the diagnosis of long COVID, I was put into a support group, an 8-week course, and that's now morphed into a peer support group for people who wanted to stay in touch. And one of the most common things that other people in the group would say was their frustration that they couldn't do the things that they used to do before they fell ill. Now, I can relate to that because I was affected by that. But for them, it was quite important. They wanted to get back to working full time. It's possible that their work were being less than helpful about, making allowance for their fatigue and the fact that they couldn't do a full-time job anymore. And what they wanted was a solution. They wanted a diagnosis and they wanted to know what they could do to make themselves better. The sad fact is that with many chronic illnesses, and certainly to come back to where I started from with chronic fatigue, there is no magic pill. There is no magic bullet. It comes down to symptom management. But that's an uncomfortable way to live, just managing your symptoms. And it's very frustrating. And that's why mindfulness can be so helpful, because really managing your symptoms starts with being mindful of them. Being mindful not only of the symptoms that you've got, but mindful of what makes them worse. The other reason mindfulness helps is because you manage things moment by moment. You're not trying to think too far ahead. Another thing mindfulness teaches you is acceptance. You are where you are. You can't change that, at least not right in this moment. And you have to deal with and accept how you are. Otherwise, you waste an awful lot of energy fighting against something that's not going to go anywhere. It's literally the immovable force meeting the irresistible force, meeting the immovable object. You've got the irresistible force of your desire to be in a different situation, meeting the immovable object of the fact that you are where you are. And it's not a pretty sight, because something's got to give and you can't change where you are. So what's going to lessen is your force. And that's what literally makes you fatigued. So this is a shout out to anyone who suffers from any form of chronic illness, particularly chronic fatigue. I hear you. I know what you're going through. No, I don't have a magic bullet. I've never claimed to have a magic bullet for anything, sadly. But if you would like to see what mindfulness can do for you, then contact me. I will be very happy to organise a mindfulness session for you, or if you happen to know a group of people who would benefit, for a group of people. A mindfulness session that is tailored to your specific needs, whether it's learning to manage your fatigue, whether it's learning to manage your pain, because there are specific techniques that can be helpful for that. If you know somebody who says they suffer from chronic fatigue, there is something that you can do to help them. You can show that you understand. And if you don't really understand, then please, please, please don't assume that you have an easy answer, because there is no easy answer. The person with chronic fatigue is like a battery. Now, you've all dealt with batteries that run out too fast. And once the battery is empty, it needs to be recharged. With chronic fatigue, that person's energy levels will exhaust themselves much quicker than yours will. And when the energy's gone, they just have to recharge the battery. One good piece of advice I was given on the course I went on was, don't let your battery get below 50%. And again, that needs mindfulness to manage, so that you know when your battery is down to 50%. But if you've got a friend with chronic fatigue and they say, I can't do it, understand. They're not blowing you off because they don't like you. They're blowing you off because they literally can't do it. And chronic fatigue can lead to lots of other chronic things. I found it made my pain worse. It certainly made my depression worse, to the point where I was suffering from suicidal ideation. I got the help I needed. But again, as with depression, there's no magic bullet. It's down to maybe taking antidepressants, but I was able to avoid that because it's down to the way you think about things. And it's about, that sounds very Pollyanna-ish, looking at what you can do rather than what you can't. And it's also down to recognising that sometimes the world is not going to help you, and accepting that. And while chronic fatigue is well recognised, long COVID as a source of chronic fatigue is still not well recognised. I'm lucky in the UK it is, and I've realised it's recognised partly because I've got the help, you know, such help as the NHS can offer, which isn't a lot because there is no cure for long COVID except time and symptom management. But also because a year ago, when the spring boosters were being, spring booster program for COVID jabs was being rolled out, I didn't qualify. Yes, I was over 70. Well, I wasn't old enough. And although I have asthma, I didn't have a disease that was, I didn't have any other disease that meant that I was eligible. This year I am. And the only difference is my diagnosis of long COVID, because they know that long COVID affects the immune system, and people with long COVID are more prone to other infections, and they're also more prone to COVID infections, which figures really. So this year I've been offered a spring COVID jab, which I accepted with alacrity, because otherwise I was going to have to pay to go privately, because I know from my autumn booster that the booster really helps my fatigue. If you have a chronic illness, and again I'm primarily talking to chronic fatigue sufferers, but the same is true of any chronic illness, you have to get to know your illness. You have to get to know what makes things better or worse for you. Because with chronic illnesses, there is no magic bullet. It's all down to symptom management. And that means recognising and understanding your symptoms. Mindfulness can help with that. But mindfulness can also help by not making your illness the focus of everything that you do, because I know how easy it is when your life is bounded because you've developed this illness to feel stuck in it. And the one thing mindfulness has also taught me is to practice an attitude of gratitude, to be grateful for the good things in life. So I'm grateful I'm going to get a COVID jab. I'm really grateful that I got the help, with such help with long COVID that the NHS can give me. I'm really, really grateful that I had a doctor who, when I said, look, I had COVID 18 months ago and I've never been the same since, actually accepted that that was really how I was, and didn't try to fob me off with saying it was all in my imagination. Now, psychology and psychosomatic illnesses, they do play a part. But very rarely will someone who suffers from chronic fatigue or chronic pain, very, very rarely is it going to be literally all in their imagination. So if you suffer from any chronic illness, I want to say, I'm with you. I hear you. I do understand the struggles that you're going through. I've been helped by my regular mindfulness practice. It's not just meditation, it's my beloved Tai Chi as well. But I've been helped by that. And because I've been helped by that, I know that you could possibly be helped by that. And if I've said something today that's made you think, oh, I can relate to that, contact me. Happy to arrange a one-to-one video session with you to target whatever you're going to do to your particular situation. And as I say, just pay what you can afford. All I ask is a minimum donation of £1 UK. So thank you for watching this video. Thank you for thinking enough of yourself to want to watch this video. And if you found anything in it that has made you think, I hope it has helped you to improve your situation. Remember that you matter. Namaste.